Hi guys, Chris here with a quick comparison between the Chuwi HiBook and the Cube iWork10 Ultimate. So both of these tablets are very similar in terms of design. They share an almost identical keyboard, and they have an Atom X5Z8300, which is the CPU in it, and it has 4 gigabytes of RAM and a 64 gigabyte eMMC. Now the difference with the dock on these, the keyboard dock, is I thought they were pretty much identical, just with a slight difference on the status LEDs, but it turns out that the supports on the actual dock themselves have a different size and spacing on them, so you can't actually interchange these keyboards at all. So make sure if you're going to buy one of these, you must get the Cube keyboard with the Cube tablet. You can't decide, oh, I want this silver keyboard now and use that on the Cube, because it's just not going to fit. You won't be able to dock that at all. Now the other difference with the keyboards is the USB 2 ports are on both sides of them. So we got one right here and one on the other side on both of the keyboards. Now they will actually power external hard drives on the Cube. The ones I've found on the Chuwi HiBook, I've been having problems with them, will not power an external hard drive for me, at least not in Windows. It's not working at all. You can use the Type-C port. That's the only way you're going to access an external hard drive. That is one of the differences, that this tablet also has the Type-C port on it. And there is quite a large difference when it comes to the quality of the screens. So benchmarks, I'm not going to go into details really on that. You can see the benchmark scores here. This is Geekbench 3. And when it comes to all the other benchmarks that I've tested out, they are almost pretty much identical. So it's not really worth me going through all of those. You'll see here that if I do go through and have a look at Antutu on the Cube here, you'll see that the scores I get are more or less the same. That got 62,000, this has got almost 64, and you'll find the case that with other benchmarks like 3D Mark and everything, that they're very similar scores. So performance wise, they're identical. Thermals are around about the same. They get up to 35 degrees on the Cube and about 38 on the HiBook. But the difference with the screens is quite obvious when you have them together. The brightness of the Cube, that gets up to 370 lux of brightness, and it doesn't have such a large gap between the digitizer panel glass and the IPS below. A lot smaller, almost looks like it's fully laminated. The gap is, I'd say, around about under a millimeter, so quite good there. And I find the panel itself doesn't have as much light leakage. That we do get a little bit of that on the Chuwi HiBook. So here's the HiBook display, which comes in at a maximum brightness of 328 lux. You see, having a look at this one, that there is definitely a larger gap there. It's quite obvious when you look at it at this angle. Front on, you don't really notice it too much, but you see there, I'd say an estimated gap of 2, maybe even 3 millimeters there. So quite a difference there. That tends to make the panel reflect a little bit more, I'd say, than the Cube. And there is some light leakage on the right hand side just along here that someone also picked up on my other video that I did with the Android review of the HiBook. And I did actually forget to mention that in the video. But yes, there's a little bit of light leakage along there and a slightly inferior panel, but it does still offer, both of them offer good color reproduction, good blacks, good level of black on it when you're looking at it straight on, at least not getting those reflections there. And one other thing with the screen on the Cube iWork10 Ultimate, or flagship as they call it, it does support an active pressure sensitive stylus, and that works in both Windows and Android. So if you need stylus support, you're one of those people that must have a stylus, then obviously that is the model you need to look at. So you can see here, this is going to work just fine here in Android without any problems. Now sound, I would say the HiBook has an edge on sound because it does have the speakers on the left and the right of the tablet, whereas the Cube here, it's both the speakers are both on the right hand side here. That's where you get them, so you don't get the good stereo separation. The Chuwi speakers are slightly louder and perform slightly better. Not quite as loud as the Cube's Cube's one, unfortunately. That is probably the biggest downside to the Cube iWork10 Ultimate there. And battery life, I did do the full battery life test on the Cube here. I'm yet to run that on the HiBook, but you're looking at around 6 hours of Android use on the Cube. You get around 5.5 that I've got a rough estimate there, 5.5, 6 on the Chuwi HiBook. When it comes to Windows, slightly less figures, you're looking at about 5 hours on both of these tablets here. 4.5 even, depending on what you're doing. If you're doing something very taxing like gaming, then that battery life is going to be cut right down to probably about 4 hours. And that is going to be dependent, of course, on your screen brightness. If you have 100% brightness on both of these panels and game, you could even possibly kill that battery life even under 3.5 hours there, because that's very demanding for the tablet to keep up with that. When it comes to charging time, the HiBook is going to be faster because it does have that Type-C port that allows you to get slightly more amperage through that. So you've got 3 amps charging it, whereas on the Chuwi, we use the micro USB port there for charging, and that's only charging at 2.5, I think. So slightly slower to fully charge it. You're looking around about 3 hours on the Chuwi, and around about 4.5 on the Cube iWork Ultimate here. So if I was to choose out of these two, I would definitely go, as you probably gathered, for the Cube iWork10 Ultimate, because the USB 2 ports can power an external hard drive, and that for me is important. We don't have the hassle of having the USB Type-C, which has no real benefit really on the Chuwi apart from faster charging, and that is it. You don't have to walk around carrying one of these Type-C adapters with you. Of course, you're still going to need a adapter here for the micro USB to USB on the Cube, but we've got the stylus support and a slightly superior screen. Definitely, hands down, the Cube iWork10 Ultimate wins it for me with this comparison between the both. That is the model I would stick with if I was going to be keeping one of these two. Now, if you would like to see more on both of these models, have a look in the playlist and also check out techtablets.com. Thank you for watching. Hopefully see you back in the channel soon.